I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. The House Judiciary Committee held an emergency markup Thursday on the Protecting Our Kids Act. Congressman Jerry Nadler and Matt Gaetz got into an exchange on an amendment regarding military spouses. Gaetz claimed that the debate shows, quote, "We have a lot of people on this committee who are not very familiar with firearms, trying to make broad-based national decisions about firearms." A string of recent mass shootings has renewed a fiery gun debate between Republicans and Democrats. Take a listen to the full exchange.
Does the gentlelady insist on her point of order?
I do not insist on my point of order.
The gentlelady does not insist on her point of order. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. The point of this section of the bill is to restrict the use of semi-automatic center-fired weapons from people aged 18 to up until 21, because it is our judgment that such people are not, should not be able to use, that for the reasons that we've gone through much of today talking about such weapons. Now, there is a carve-out in the bill for persons of either sex in the armed services, because persons in the armed services are specifically trained in the use of firearms. Their spouses are not. This amendment would make the spouses of persons in the military, ages 18 to 20, eligible to use semi-automatic center-fire guns. It's the judgment of the bill that such people should not be, and they do not fall under the category of people who get military training. Their spouses do, but they don't, and therefore this is a very ill-conceived amendment, and I would urge opposition to it. I yield back. Who seeks recognition? For what purpose does Mr. Gaetz seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe you've shifted ground a little bit, because earlier today, the basis to not allow people 18 till they were 21 to have this type of firearm was because they were not sufficiently neurologically developed. Now we're saying it's an issue of training. And so that's...
Gentleman yield?
Well, there's a few other points I want to make. There's a few other points I want to make, and I'm sure I'll have time for us to be able to engage on that question. But as the member of Congress from Florida's 1st Congressional District, I represent the highest concentration of active duty military in the country, and I feel particularly obligated to speak on behalf of the Massey Amendment to vindicate the Second Amendment rights of military families. There are two key points. Military families don't get to choose the cities that they live in. They are told by the Army, Air Force, Navy, and so if you are a family that has been sent to do your duty for our country in a Democrat-run state or a Democrat-run city where they have defunded the police, created sanctuaries for illegals, and invited violence, now you're forcing those patriotic families to be functionally helpless in conditions not of their choosing. The second key point is that oftentimes there is knowledge of scaled deployments. And so if in my community, we have 400 service members going to fight abroad, we typically know that. That's words out in the community. Different organizations are supporting family members, doing food drives, and engaging in other support. And so you could potentially leave people subject to gun control, subject to crime, with the criminals knowing that their spouse is not home to be a part of whatever protection plan that particular family has. And so I think that as Democrats are prepared to oppose this amendment to provide physical security for military families in their most vulnerable time, potentially during a deployment, we really ought to think carefully about the downstream consequences of that. I yield to Chairman Nadler.
Thank you. The gentleman is entirely right. I said earlier today that 18 to 20-year-olds are neurologically not prepared for this. I meant it. I still mean it. Of course, that's overcome for someone in the armed services who receives intensive military training.
How do you know that? Like, what are you? How much training does someone need to overcome their neurological deficiencies at age?
The amount that the military services gives them is sufficient, but it is not the case for the spouses of such people unless they too are in the military and get the same training.
I'm sure the chairman takes my point that the spouses have an obligation to protect at times their home, their homestead, their
gentleman
children,
yield?
while someone is deployed. I'll gladly yield to the gentleman.
I think we all are concerned, as you are concerned, and you well know that this person could get a rifle or a shotgun and be trained on that. This spouse, male or female, 18 and 21 and under, or under 21, could get a rifle or shotgun. So there is a means of protecting themselves.
To reclaim
but
my
it doesn't
time,
proliferate guns everywhere.
But the challenge is, Ms. Jackson-Lee, that then here in Congress, we are choosing how military spouses ought to defend their families. And we're prescribing that. And I think that that's a bit heavy-handed for people who are willing to move anywhere, go anywhere, to fight for our country and defend our freedoms. And I, particularly for female spouses, a long gun or a rifle may present different storage challenges, different logistical challenges in the event that you have an intruder. There's a reason that handguns are more typically used for home defense than rifles. And I would suggest that we wouldn't want to make those decisions for any American family because we wouldn't want to be held responsible for something that would go tragically wrong. I yield to the gentleman from Kentucky.
And the amendment allows them to have a firearm as long as it's only sufficient for hunting a rabbit or a squirrel. I mean, the types of firearms that the spouse would be allowed to have, their bill limits it to that. The amendment opens it back up to the types of firearms that are suitable for defense of family and property. Yet, without the amendment, they are going to be limited to firearms that are designed to hunt squirrels and rabbits.
And I don't mean to be overly critical, but this debate highlights the fact that I think we have a lot of people on this committee who are not very familiar with firearms, trying to make broad-based national decisions about firearms that could really be harmful to a lot of American families, especially military families. And I yield back.